Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Thanks for tuning in here tonight. Wherever you are, please give this a like and a share. We're going to be all over the planet here today. We've got a lot to cover, and we're going to start off with what I think is the number one concern, underlying and overarching concern with the the situation of the coup, shall we say? So, welcome, guys. We've got a guest coming on here in just a minute, and but hang out at the end of the show. I'm going to give you guys all an outline of some other big stuff that's coming up this week. It's going to be a busy week. So we've got a lot to cover and a lot to cover tonight. So without further ado, welcome, James. Welcome back. It's been a minute or so. On the grand scheme of things, that's enough time for all kinds of insanity to bust loose. You are the foremost guy I can see anywhere on the planet when it comes to being a watchdog or a hound, sleuth, whatever people want to call it, on what the WHO is up to with their global scamdemic, plandemic, the treaty to to end all other treaties, shall we say. James, thanks for taking a minute to come and join us. We're only going to have you for a little bit of a time here tonight, but where do you start with an update on this abomination called the pandemic treaty? I brought up an article and sent that to you, and there's a backstory to that. I'll fill you guys in on another day, but it appears that the kind of basically the pandemic treaty guys are having some issues, and this came across to me across my desk here in Canada from around the other side of the world. But what struck me about this article, and this is kind of where I wanted to start off for everybody, was here I was seeing a voice from the other side of the world that gets it and understands and is aware of what's going on in the current situation of this pandemic treaty. So that's really struck me, James.
Well, let me start off by being as supremely facetious as I possibly can. Okay. The World Health Organization is just looking out for your best interest. No, okay, that didn't work. That's not what's going on.
Yeah, no, sorry, no, yeah,
All
nobody
right,
here.
so I'll be very, very serious. I'm sure you've heard the terms mis, dis, and malinformation.
Oh yeah, Vanessa von der Leyen is going to be running on that, and she's a grandmother to lead the EU again this year. So that mis and disinformation, that's the number two priority on the planet, isn't it?
I'm going to add a couple more. Um, there's the danger, and I mean this very seriously, of old information because things change, and cross-wired information, attributing some information that belongs over here to something over there. So
Right.
let me try to explain, the current state of affairs, because if we try to do the whole history of what's going on and how we got here, it's going to take a day and a half. So
Yeah, most people know this is insane. They're bad, but what most people are always afraid of is what are they slipping in that we're not seeing?
exactly. And so if you've ever watched an American or Canadian football game, I'm not talking soccer, I'm talking football, and somebody's running for a touchdown and they start celebrating on the 10-yard line and they drop the ball or they get tackled or they fumble or something, or any kind of road race where at the last minute somebody kicks at the end and the person who was already celebrating before they crossed the finish line gets beaten. We don't want to be that guy. We don't want to do that. And this is what I'm observing happening.
Right.
Old information, changes that happened a year ago, people just noticed. And they're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Everything is wonderful now. And they're, celebrating before they cross the goal line. On May 28th, 2024, they're going to have a meeting in Geneva, and they may or may not vote on these two separate things, amendments to the international health regulations and a new quote unquote pandemic agreement. Well, if I have my way, it's all going down the tubes before any of that ever happens for a multitude of reasons. Number one, with the amendments, they should not even be allowed to consider voting on any amendments because Article 55 of the International Health Regulations says very clearly that they have to give 4 months' notice, which passed on January 27th, 2024, and they failed miserably. I've been reporting on that since October because in October they knew that they were not going to reach an agreement.
Right.
So January 27th went flying by. They had meetings in February. They had a meeting in March. They've had meetings in April. They still haven't reached an agreement on the amendments. They're supposed to have a new version scheduled for May 10th, so a little more than a week from today. And then they're having another meeting on the 16th and the 17th. Well, that gives like, a couple of days to read it before they intend, to vote on it. That is just absolutely not acceptable. Now,
Right.
a lot of people have said a lot of things about what is going on in these amendments in the treaty, and they've crossed-wired all of it. But here's something that probably nobody other than myself wants to talk about. What has popped up in the amendments are proposed changes to Articles 24 and 27, which deal with the thing that these amendments are really, I should say, the regulations are all about, which, amongst many other things, is international travel. Now, I get it. Most people are not busy, traveling internationally. So a lot of people are going to tune out and go, oh, who cares? Well, somebody who wants to go on vacation, or somebody who travels for business. And if you're concerned at all about, the lockdown planet, coming to control your life, what they want to do is strengthen Article 31. Now, everybody raise your hand. How many people have read Article 31 of the International Health Regulations? Okay. Um, Here's what it essentially says, that when you leave your country and you are over international waters, either on a cruise boat or an airplane or whatever it might be, um, the captain is the king of the castle. I mean, that is the law of the land. And when you land in another country, you are screwed. Your rights and freedoms, your charter, your Bill of Rights, your whatever you think you've got, doesn't matter. You're now in some other country's jurisdiction. And since 2005, they have had an agreement. It's not the WHO mandating this, it's the International Health Regulations. All of the nations agreed in 2005 to Article 31. And I know people who have suffered because of this. They have in Article 31 that nations can compel international travelers to go through a medical examination, prophylaxis or prevention, vaccine, whatever they call vaccines these days, isolation, and quarantine. And so when you land in another country, say you're going to a Caribbean island or you're going to Africa or somewhere, and they have an outbreak, um, they have they believe they have the authority to compel you to go through those procedures. Well, they want to change the language in Articles 24 and 27 so that the authorities can enforce isolation and quarantine as appropriate. That's a little too vague for my taste. If you want to make it so that one human being can essentially incarcerate another human being as appropriate, then stand up in support of these proposed amendments. Now, this is where we get to I think the core question, which underlies what I just said, but it also totally underlies everything going on in the quote unquote agreement or treaty. What right does any man or woman, official, government official, have to determine that another person, that their body is hazardous to some other human being? What test, what determination, you know, if anyone has ever been sick around me and they say, "Oh, don't get near me. I don't want you to get sick." I don't care. I don't believe that that is a thing. It's a function of how healthy you are. And how is it that anyone can determine that another person can be locked up because somebody says so? Now, the tests that were used during COVID, if you didn't get the memo, they weren't even tests. The RT-PCR, laboratory process that Kerry Mullis, got the Nobel Prize for, before he passed away, he said very clearly, this is not a diagnostic. How many times did you hear of people being told that they, failed the test because it was cranked up to, 45 cycles or whatever, and they were in.
Trudeau's bank account was driving that testing bus around the world at the end of the day.
There you go. If and people were told that they were an asymptomatic case of COVID. Well, come on, people. What
So
in the heck is that?
it
Right?
just plays into anybody at their discretion. As required, you are now dangerous.
Mhm.
You must be dealt with. So, and that's kind of my understanding of where they're at with this treaty is. There's a lot. When they had their last little gathering, it turned into something like 120 some pages of proposed amendments, and they shelved 99% of it for another day, put it on the back burner, kind of wrapping the rest of it up around this
Mhm.
as required. And Joe Biden has given his stamp of approval to the world publicly, and now they're heading back to the meeting room to hopefully get consensus on this.
Well, that's with the treaty. What I'm talking about with Article 31 and the traveling, that's the amendments. Okay. And
Right.
so the core question is, wait a minute, the tests are bogus. They don't determine whether or not someone is a danger to another person. And quite frankly, if you got one of these jabs and if they're designed and they do what they're supposed to do, and the person next to you is busy shedding what was just jabbed into them, who is really dangerous here? But the jabs clearly do not stop infection, they do not stop transmission. They derange your immune system and cause disease, disability, death, both, excess and sudden. How in the world is that criteria? Oh, show us your papers that you're compliant, right? And we'll interpret that as, oh, you're safe for the person sitting next to you. This is a question that our society has to address. And it's the underlying fraud that is driving the other agreement. They call it the pandemic agreement, pandemic treaty. It's really a framework convention. It's gotten to such levels of absurdity that it's really become a comedy. So here's what's going on with that. Most people are not clear on why these negotiations are even happening. And they're not what people think. The relatively poor nations around the world, very specifically many of the nations in Africa, want this agreement. They were the ones who called for these
They think they're
negotiations.
being left out. They think they're not getting the good medicine, and they want equal opportunity and access to the good medicine that only we're getting here. So that's what they're fighting for from
I
that.
use Canada as an example quite often because 40 million people, they signed a contract for 400 million jabs, 10 for everybody. And so a lot of nations looked at that and said, well, hey, wait a minute, we're not getting our fair share. And the purpose of these negotiations is to ensure equitable access to pandemic related products. Well, you have to erase what you think you know because wait a minute, why would anybody want more of something that causes harm? Well, it's not about your health, it's about the transfer of wealth. Because what these nations and the oligarchs in those nations missed out on was the profit. And so what they want is billions of dollars to go looking for pathogens. They say looking for pathogens with pandemic potential, but in
They,
my head, I hear pathogens with pandemic profiteering potential.
They all want their own munitions factory. I mean, factory is basically what it is, and this is legalizing, legitimizing that under this auspices of Joseph Mengele's utopian dream. At the end of the day, uh, this conquest by terror of fear and manipulation of biological warfare, the next gen warfare, and they all want their slice of because this eliminates then all the whole war crimes premise. Law and order in society as we know it is out the window. History is irrelevant. Nuremberg is gone. All of the everything that stabilized our society is out the window at the end of this treaty, if it should be ratified and people should comply to it.
So, there's a wonderful debate going on, in many circles, the terrain idea, or, the virus idea. And regardless of which side of that disagreement you may be on, whether viruses exist and cause disease or not, what cannot be denied is that the story that came out of China in 2020 was, oh, here's a digital file with a bunch of letters in it that purported to be the genetic sequence of the Wuhan Institute of Virology 1 virus, changed the name to SARS-CoV-2. Let's go pop that into some lipid nanoparticles and start testing a jab. How much do you think that data file was worth? A couple of $100 billion, maybe a couple of trillion? Okay. That's the new gold rush. If you can find the new scary genetic sequence, whether a virus exists or not, okay, if you come up with the new Omicron, like South Africa and Botswana did, and hand it over to the WHO and the world, and then if you could imagine, you're a scientist somewhere, you're putting this together on your computer, and you get this scary Omicron genetic sequence, and you hand it over, and you watch Pfizer and Moderna put that into the boosters and make a couple of $1 billion, and you don't get a piece of the pie.
The,
What was said in the amendments from a year and a half ago that the African nations put forth, in my own language, right, in my way of speaking, they said, we're not giving you any more stinking pathogens unless you start sharing the benefits with us. And this is what these negotiations are really all about. And they've run into a snag because they're talking about trying to extract a pound of flesh from big pharma. So the United States and the European Union and the United Kingdom, all of the nations that are essentially supporting big pharma, have been pushing back against the smaller nations who want a piece of that pie. They want geographically distributed manufacturing. They want investment capital coming from nations like Canada, the global north, wealthier countries, to build out the industry locally in the less wealthy nations, so that if there's ever a problem, they can manufacture their own jabs and force it upon their own people and profit from it. And this is having a difficult time. And so, even though this whole thing was set up as a framework convention where they just wanted to, sign on to sort of an empty blank check contract, like the framework convention for climate change, and then they would meet year after year after year, work out all the details, hand out all the contracts, they're having trouble. And so, the latest word coming out of their negotiations, which are going on this week and next about the treaty, is that they have three issues that they're nowhere near agreement, at least as of this past Monday. Number one is the search for the pathogens, the One Health approach, because they don't want to be forced to hand them over without getting some benefit. Then the second one is the pathogen access and benefit sharing system. Which piece of the pie are they going to be given? And then there's the whole thing about the money. So those three avenues, what they've been circulating, we'll see what they decide on, is, well, let's just agree that we can't agree on those, but let's get all the nations to sign on to an unfinished, unagreed upon document. And those three topics will set up a new set of negotiations for the next 2 years. And they're shooting for May 31st, 2026. So, it's just this long game of wear everybody down. Who wants to pay attention to this crap for another 2 years? I want to get out of the who and on with the new. I'm done with the WHO.
They're quantifying their own bureaucracy to extend the torture process at the end of the day. And for me, I'm going to really dumb this down for myself and those out there just like me. What I hear out of this and what I find the most terrifying is that they have replaced the entire health dialogue model, vernacular, vocabulary, process, infrastructure industry with a bioweapons program. And this is what they're fighting over now. So none of this is about health. It's about which way that we can conduct biological warfare against each other, because there's nobody in this community or that pays any attention is going to believe for a that this was a natural occurring event. We know it is not. We understand unrestricted warfare, and this is what I believe to narrow it down to brass tacks is exactly what we are seeing is this unrestricted warfare being agreed upon with business and at the state level to be scaled internationally.
And I'll dumb it down even further. Oh, hell no. Okay.
We need to stop this now.
Yes.
Right now, the stick in the front wheel of the
So,
proverbial.
you ask a couple of questions, right? What's with the secrecy? Right now, I'm going to hit the rewind button and point out something that nobody wants to talk about. In 2022, contrary to what a lot of people maybe believe, they pretended to adopt amendments to the international health regulations, 5 articles, and they never bothered to actually vote. Right now, that should be enough of a scandal to bring Tedros down. Okay. But nobody's talking about it. Rob Roos, I take that back. Rob Roos and 11 other members of the European Parliament, it's 5 months ago now, on November 28th, wrote a letter to Tedros and said, hey, we see that you guys are pretending to have passed these amendments. And Iran and the Netherlands and Slovakia and New Zealand were smart enough to reject them. But everybody else is just going along. And they said, it'd be really great if you could show us some evidence that you had a vote. Well, you know what the WHO did? They took down the videos from the 2022 meetings, and you can't see now the video that they were supposedly voting, and they never even talked about it. All right. So, their response to evidence is to remove the evidence that there was no evidence. And so what happened with that is Rob Roos actually came to the United States about a month and a half or so ago, presented this to Senator Ron Johnson in an open public forum. He said, look, they did this. And the collective wisdom of everybody in Washington in that meeting was, whatever. What are you going to do? And, my head is exploding. I'm like, you show evidence of complete and total fraud. This organization is pretending that amendments were adopted in 2022. There's no evidence of a vote ever happening, and everybody just kind of shrugs. And so, if that isn't enraging, on some level, the theatrical production that's going on here, is somewhat entertaining because it's the theater of the absurd.
And I think that inherently answers this question that regardless of policy or process, somebody like Trudeau is going to do whatever the meat muppet handlers suggest that he do that puts more dividends into their
I see the question popping up on the screen, and it's a very good question. I'll do my best to answer it very quickly. In Canada and Australia, New Zealand, The authority to engage in international agreements flows from, good old King Charles down to the Governor General to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and Parliament has no say. If you look up, in Canada or the other nations I mentioned, the manner in which international agreements are entered into um, has the people have no say, and their representatives in Parliament have no say. Now, you can scream and yell and let them know that you are very, very unhappy about it, but the people to be screaming and yelling at are your prime minister and his cabinet. And so this is a very difficult situation, because what is really the case, it's not, and I'm going to say this very clearly, this is not an attack on national sovereignty. This is something very, very different. This is a trade deal. This is, organized criminal activity to funnel money, from, the people who want to control what products are made and used and distributed. And so what we're dealing with here is a confusion, in the sense that foreign policy in many nations is completely separated from the will of the people.
Yep.
We all have a very serious problem in that our leaders in engaging in foreign affairs are out of control on every level you can imagine. I find it hard to find anybody who is happy with how the leader of their country is engaging with the rest of the world. And that is what we need to get back. We need to get control of our own government. To summarize this, and put a cherry on the top with some whipped cream, and just make it simple. Um, Over the last 4.5 years, your local tyrants, whoever they may be at whatever level, they didn't need any amendments to the international health regulations or any new treaty to do what they did to abuse your rights and freedoms. Okay. So the local issues, the problems that you have with your local, municipality, province, state, whatever it may be, um, those have to be dealt with locally. The amendments deal with international travel. And I just encourage people to look at Article 31 in the existing regulations. It is a absolutely, clear-cut violation of fundamental human rights of bodily autonomy when you're traveling internationally. And the treaty is just, how much money can they soak out of, governments around the world to redirect, to make products that harm people? It's insanity that we're dealing with, but I do trust that there's a lot of sane people listening to us today. And the clearer they get on what is going on, and the louder you put your voices out there, just share this video to the best of your ability and let everybody know what's going on. Everybody who looks at this says, this is insane. What are these people doing? This needs to stop. It needs to stop now.
Well, yeah, James, I couldn't have asked for a better segue and confirmation about some of the stories that I've got coming up in just a few minutes. So, thank you so much for that. It
Thanks for having me.
makes me happy that I'm on the right page with things. There's a website, listed on James's name tag there, but I want to encourage everybody to go to his Substack and make sure that you get subscribed there. It's a free subscription over there, and that is going to be your fastest way to plug into all of the resources, everything that you guys need to know to understand what's going on
I'll
with
give
those.
you I'll give you one quicker way. Okay. I always give my phone number. People can call me anytime. 310-619-3055. 310-619-3055. Call me, text me. If you have any questions, I think I can help people get up to speed on this. It's ridiculous. Okay. What they're doing is absurd. They're trying to do more of the same of what they did and profit from it all over the world, taking money from wealthy nations like Canada and giving it to oligarchs around the world to make products that harm people. If you're for,
wrapping death and
well, if,
wrapping destruction under fancy words in order to create a new industry and a new drug lord's marriage with policy makers from the top on down. So I think that there's a whole bunch of us that have got the same answer to that. No. And we'll dive into that. Well, James, this has been fantastic. You are one of the bravest individuals I know, putting your number out there and your face all over the world like you do. Thank you for being so mighty and finding the time to come and join us. Give us
Anytime. Thanks,
update
man.
on what's going here, and we'll have you back again soon. So thank you so much.
Take
All right, guys. Wow. Fantastic. James is always a mountain of information, and boy, oh baby ducks, we're gonna have some fun leading off into some of this, because if you hang on here just a couple of minutes, I see a comment coming up here, or that came up here just a minute ago. This one here. Thanks for the comment, Catherine. I'm going to pull up a Substack that I put together and published just yesterday, but in a couple of minutes, because we're going to get to that, because that ultimately is the easy button to ending all of the shenanigans, and we're gonna touch on that. But first, as promised, we're gonna make a quick like 5 stops in 3 minutes or less to talk about some of the other things that are going on in the speed world of news. The Ukraine troops are running out, guys. All of this money and billions that they're sending to Ukraine, what they don't have is bodies. This time last year, they were training 10 to 12 battalions a month in the Europe, brigades in the Ukraine. How many people is in a brigade? Between 3 and 5,000 soldiers in a brigade. Sorry, my lips are not keeping up with my brain. But 3 to 5,000 soldiers per brigade. They were training 10 to 12 brigades per month. As of January and February of this year, they were training 0 brigades. What does that mean for the guys on the front line? Well, it's not looking good at all. Like I keep saying, the only thing that is happening, keeps going, is the dying, and they're losing literally miles by the day, and the bodies are stacking up because they don't have enough bodies to reinforce. And people kind of forgot or didn't get the memo when Putin said in August of 2022 that he was putting all of his factories on full munitions production. So this is creating issues. I mean, some of the neighboring regions that they're now having to deal with, like war in action, things like GPS jamming and danger to flights, drones, shells, those kinds of things, kind of just going wobbly and sideways because the front line is moving. So do all of those international boundaries and lines. And so now people are starting to get the memo that, hey, wait a minute, something might be going on over there, and it's not, and it's kind of coming our direction. Some of the war stank is coming to some of the neighboring regions. Over the last week, a couple of what I think were insane announcements. Biden was proud to announce that they're now seizing Russian states' assets. So how's that work? Basically, they froze everything that any Russian owned outside of Russia to try to punish the country of Russia for what people abroad were doing. So they put a freeze, a moratorium on all of their finances and whatnot. So that was Biden's great announcement. This is pursuant to Chrystia Freeland lobbying like mad person to try and more and engage and arrange more sanctions packages. I have absolutely no doubt that she was behind this move from freezing to seizing. She is a big proponent in all of that. But how is that actually working out? Well, over in Italy, Prime Minister Mia Meloni there called the Russian envoy into her office to have a discussion because, oh, wait a minute, Russia seized some of their assets in Russia. And so the Italian government is now bent out of shape that, wait a second, what are you doing? And yeah, what I found very, very interesting that the instant Russia does what the rest of the allies are doing to Russia, as soon as they play the same way, you literally don't have anybody in North America talking about this in the news or media space. Instead, I got to go to Uganda to get an article about a guy that that gets it and is looking at us and going, "What did you expect, you crazy fools?" Like, so this is kind of the escalade and the insanity. And so, and I said I was going to hammer through a whole bunch of stuff. So we're going to take a bit of a quick pivot here to what Mr. Blinken is doing. And Mr. Blinken is running around the world right now like a chicken with his head cut off in total panic mode because he's been to Ukraine, China, Taiwan, and now in the Middle East. And basically, it's been nothing but bad news everywhere he has been. In the Ukraine, the news that he got was we cannot hold them. We are backing up. There is nothing we can do. It is incredibly grim. If we don't get more bodies, more soldiers right away, then this is going to be over very soon. And the EU's response to that was basically said, "Yeah, no, we're not sending boys. We're sending our soldiers to die over there in Ukraine." So or Blinken left Ukraine, not very pleased with the situation update there. Went to China and basically got treated like a staffer and shuffled out the back door. There's a video going around, Xi Jinping kind of going, when is he leaving? Very, 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 dismissive. So it didn't go well in China for Mr. Blinken, and now they're looking for a bit of an off ramp in the Middle East, and he is there. And there's more behind the scenes going on uh, than what people might necessarily be understanding some of the nuances on. I'm not saying anybody's right, wrong, or otherwise. I'm just going to bring up some facts, some points that you're not going to get elsewhere. So there's some things at play going on there. And the big one is that the ICC is considering issuing an arrest warrant for Mr. Netanyahu for what they're doing there in the Middle East and the problem that that creates then. And this is why Blinken is there looking to organize and because they're both, sworn to not go to a ceasefire. So he is there looking to establish, what did they call this? A it's a bizarre term, a sustainable calm. That's it. They're looking to establish a sustainable calm so that no side has to look like they're giving in to the other in order to cease, the activities going on there. Because if they don't, and this continues, then the ICC gets involved, and then we've got a serious escalation. So um, now, this story that I wanted to touch on comes from Georgia, actually, and this has to do with what we're seeing at all of the university campuses. Oh, guess what? They've got the same problem in Georgia. And again, this is not picking sides, but to understand the reality of the situation. These sit-ins, camp-ins, affirmative actions, takeovers, whatever you want to call them, are manufactured by these organizations that are trying to destabilize and create this chaos. They're doing it intentionally. These are bought and paid organizations. And over in Georgia, they're at least asking the question. There is no reason or common sense. There is no justification. This is not a natural event. So who is paying for it? And they're kind of pulling the scab off of George Soros's activities there. So now we are at the one that some of y'all are going to find a little bit more interesting, and exactly what James was referring to, and what I think is a much mislabeled conversation happening around the country right now. And there is, in fact, an easy button. Back in 2019, I tried to inspire a rally called the Pots and Pans Rally. And ultimately, that was an idea that I had hijacked literally from Iceland. And why did I do that? Was because I was aware and I understood at that time already. And to be honest with you, I wasn't even aware at that time of the myth is Canada. I think I was just kind of getting introduced to it there. But unbeknownst to all of that information, I already understood that Canada was not a sovereign nation. And I see so many people running around out here thinking there is nothing we can do. 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 Meanwhile, nobody wants to look at the one thing that is an absolute, that is been waiting for us to do. This is the book that's been on the shelf collecting dust since the 1930s, waiting for us to do. And in that 90 years in between, the guys have the crooks and the bad guys have decided they don't give two hoots. They've moved in and claimed it all as their own. The what do they call them? Squatters have taken over the country, right? So it comes down to understanding a couple of really basic things. And the reason why I'm bringing this conversation up yet again is because people are going to get sideswiped. They are going to get smashed in the side of the head again real soon with what we went through in 1997. And this time around, I believe it's going to be a very different conversation. Why? And this is why I keep coming back to doing in Iceland. There are so many people across the country within positions of power that are misleading or abusing or taking advantage of for their own agendas, shall we say, the understanding and the knowledge that Canada is not, in fact, sovereign. So I put this Substack together with the help of the Myth is Canada, in fact, because they are the most amazing resource for actually understanding this situation. And I wanted to just bring in a couple of recent highlights and points as to, people that they don't understand the significance of. When Trudeau calls it the Quebec problem, every time Quebec gets what they want and doesn't have to do something the rest of the country has to do, and and Justin Trudeau dismisses it as the Quebec problem, well, guess what? He knows. He has been carrying this dirty little secret. To the rest of us, it's a dirty little secret. They don't even care anymore. They're absolutely flamboyant about it. And that's the only difference between Daddy Trudeau. Daddy Trudeau set the stage. It became the history, the written knowledge and information, and it was all a lie. So it was kind of astounding to me when I met with a conservative leader, and this was in 2021, who this was just running up to the conservative leadership race. And I met with him. fellow from the Mythos Canada and I, Doug, met with them, and we actually discussed that, and he laughed us off, saying that, so what? We rule through implied consent. Um, and most people, they say, okay, well, that's the way it is, the way it is. But, you know, it isn't the way it is. It's just the way we're allowing it to be. And this is what I find interesting about Danielle Smith. She's been coming to the table and making big, bold moves, and bringing the word sovereignty into the Alberta discussion, as she is fighting democracy. She's anti-sovereignty. She's, this, that, and the other thing, and she's making headway. And she just shrugs it off and says, "Well, it worked for Quebec. It worked for Quebec." Why did it work for Quebec? Because Quebec knows, and they've been blackmailing the rest of the country for decades and decades and decades. And it's nobody actually truly understands the word sovereign. And I see this is becoming a problem because people are trying to protect something that doesn't exist. And I'm not saying that this is malicious or evil or dark intent, but it muddies the waters and it allows the waters to stay being muddy. And people don't understand what being sovereign actually means. Being sovereign means not being subservient to another country's laws. Pretty basic. But yet here we are still, in fact, subservient to the 1867 BNA law and the notwithstanding clause, which means at any point in time when the Canadian people decide or say that they are in, like mind, and they want to do something, somebody back behind the curtain can say, "Nope, you can't do that." Is that sovereign? Is that really sovereign? Right? So this article that I put together really is just an entry level point that arms you guys with the facts, links, the documentation, um, giving people some of the correct vernacular. If we are not using the right words, this is why they talk to us like we are 3 freaking years old. And anybody that does talk like this, which way am I making my screens are crossed here? Anybody that does use this language, they are terrified of. They are absolutely mortified of anybody that understands even the basics of what is contained in this one singular Substack without going into the micro nuts and bolts of it. And this is, again, it's a wash, rinse, repeat, unfortunately, of history, because I'm not a lunatic. I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, and I'm also not an idiot. This has been discussed and explained at the highest levels within our country for more than 100 years, but we, the people at large, at all, are not listening. We don't get it. And when the instant we allow somebody to dismiss us, we lose yet again, right? And so this is how not being sovereign, and I think this is, it goes to go back to the beginning, um, to understand where de facto is defined in here, right? Um, The de facto doctrine is necessary to maintain the supremacy of the law and to preserve peace and order in the community at large, since any other rule would lead to such uncertainty and confusion as to break up the order and quiet of all civil administration. Kind of like we got right now, right? Right. So it's whoever wants to make up a law or enforce the law, whoever's in power gets to do that kind of thing. um and it's not that they have the authority of the people, they just assume the authority and provide peace and order. And that is not, peace and order is not the definition of freedom, um or the purpose of law. Now there's a I don't have it here handy, but I will put it out there for people. I'm going to put this all together in a Substack for everybody tomorrow. But there's a quote from a fellow named Frederick Bastet, a book in 1815. It says that defines what freedom is. And I think I should make a t-shirt of this literally. It says, the only proper purpose of law in a free society is to prevent injustice. That's law's job, prevent injustice. It is not to organize society. It doesn't decide classes. Law is not supposed to decide classes. Anytime the law, which is force, organize trade, religion, education, or any facet of society, it destroys freedom and justice by using force. Natural association, natural organization of free people is entirely different without force. Now, that is very profound when you put that in the context of the difference between de facto and sovereign. So I really want people to do their research, do your own research. Walter Cool. I wish that I had been able to talk to some of these guys. Um, this is not new, and it's not news, but it's the most important thing in the world is understanding the differentiation. Right now, this is the most critical information for Canadians if we actually want change, because all of this has been a lie, and as long as we keep going along to get along with the lie, all we are doing is playing Canadian roulette, literally. And this is where, again, do some research. Although the process is still not over for Iceland, they initiated the process of constitutional conventions by forcing constitutional conventions, jailing all of their bankers and their corrupt politicians, and reestablishing a constitution. And a couple of interesting things that happen with that. And this is one that I really would like people to understand. Just like the proceeds of crime get stripped to cover victim costs, in this case, it's called odious debt. The debt that these criminals have created in Canada, it's odious. It stinks very much badly, and that goes with them to their jail cells and let the courts decide. And this is why this is important for us to know, is because whether we like it or not, the instant any single province initiates the process of constitutional conventions, guess what? Everybody else has a decision to make. Like it or not, want it or not, you're going to have to get educated at that point in time, because every single treaty becomes null and void. The currency becomes null and void. Borders have to be reestablished. Nations have to be reestablished. Constitutions have to be reestablished. So there's work involved with becoming debt free. But at the end of the day, it is, as James suggested earlier, it is literally the silver bullet. It's the silver bullets to all of the corruption in Ottawa, every last single one of them. It's the silver bullets to the international banking cartels and the Geneva death cult, the WHO, the WEF. All of those things then have to, at that point, be negotiated with whatever each one of the provinces and territories peoples decided to live under the rules by, how they wanted to establish those kinds of things. So this is where we have much to discuss, and clarifying the language is going to be critical to ciphering truth from noise and nonsense. Now, what I did here with this was to give you guys the right places, because if you don't get it from the right places, you end up in one of these bastardized cults that wants to take shortcuts and create things like petitions and groups and those kinds of things. Well, guess what? That doesn't work. It doesn't get recognized. It's complete parasitical endeavor, and all you do is you destroy people by doing so. So having the right language is critically important. This is not straw man. This is not freeman of the land. This is about jurisdiction. It's all about the jurisdiction. And when you're not using the right vernacular or language in the right jurisdiction, you might as well be speaking a foreign language. So this is why it is critically important. So this piece on Substack is a great place to start with understanding not how to defend yourself against the guys that just want to dismiss you. They want to call you the conspiracy theorist, the whack job, the wackadoodle, when we know that the entire liberal charade is a a wackadoodle endeavor. I'm gonna do it just because. Bear with me. Y'all are gonna appreciate the conundrum of this. If I can find it in, there we go. Okay, you know, true. I have a question. Just to clarify things, because I don't want to be accused of using the wrong context. But is it wacko or wacko? Anybody? You got me on that? Wacko, 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 wacko. Anyways, guys, I wanted to just throw that out there a little bit to chuckle at, and to end it off, a couple of previews of things that are coming up in the next couple of days. This one tomorrow. This is going to be fun, guys. You're going to want to tune in for this one. If you guys have been jumping out of your seats with the shenanigans in Parliament and Trudeau's obsession with Diagolon and all of this, well, tomorrow night, guys, we have Derek Rance. Some of you might know him from Plaid Army. Many of them will know him from the Diagolon white supremacist organization that lives in Trudeau's head rent free, and is literally turning our entire parliamentary system into an even more laughable charade just for living rent free in their head as a couple of podcasters. This is the absurdity of it. They have so little credibility and intelligence and intellect, and our intelligence services, if they're allowing or condoning any of this, need to have their funding ceased immediately for lack of getting the truth out. So we're going to have an absolutely amazing discussion with Derek tomorrow, and we're going to cover all of this. He's got a new book out. These guys live to trigger Trudeau. So we'll talk about that. Mein Kampf. Meme Camp. Let me get that right. And then on Friday, Bankers, Bandits, Bullion, and Bucks with Bryce, as usual. He's been on fire. There's lots to go over, lots of shaking around in the financial world. So when you want to ask a question about how the conspiracies versus the theories affect your finances, your future, the currency, all of those things, tune in on Friday and put your questions there. He loves to stop and answer questions. Saturday is going to be a busy day. We're going to do another watch party, guys. This time, completely different vein. We're going to take a look at a series. I'll give you guys just a couple of seconds of backstory. I got about a minute left here. A couple of seconds of backstory. The BBC did this in 2019. It was so disturbing. It was only up for a couple of months, and they pulled it, buried it, moved it down the memory hole. Well, I got some copies of this, and when y'all get a chance to watch this, you think the Simpsons are predictive, or you think Black Mirror is creepy, or Orwell knew what was going on? put all three of those together and add that to the local news cycles and narratives, and what we see happening around us right now is going to blow your freaking minds. So tune in Saturday. We're going to cover the first 2 episodes. This is a 6-part series. I've been holding on to this for a while, but I just can't anymore. So tune in, join us, bring your most calming beverage, and grab a seat and plug in on Saturday evening. And in the afternoon, I need to understand. I need to know why people are so obsessed with supporting BlackRock. I really do, because there's alternatives out there, but people completely skip the understanding of who they're actually giving their money to. And we need to get serious about dollar politics, because it's all about the money, guys. Everything is about the money. This entire cabal only exists for one reason: to extract every dime they can from you, to bleed you dry every second of your life. They want to steal that from you. And BlackRock is the biggest culprit out there, and we're going to talk about ways of making sure they never get your money again. So I need to understand why people are so hesitant about changing some of the simplest things that they can do. So this is an RSVP event only, guys. Contact me, message me, email me. There's a number there as well, but join us for that one at 4 o'clock Mountain Time, 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock Central on Saturday. So that's it, guys. It's a busy week for me coming up at the end of this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to blow some minds. We're going to show people some stuff. But at the end of the day, I love you all. Stay mighty, my fellow hostages. It's the only way I can look at it now, is we are temporary hostages of a cataclysmic regime. But you know what? We got them right where we are. All right, guys? I love y'all. Stay strong. Stay mighty. And we will see you tomorrow. It's going to be, it'll be the highlight of the week.